Tonight, the votes are in.
My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty.
Democrats claiming victory across all major elections Tuesday.
What a night for the Democratic Party.
The response from Republicans and what it means ahead of next year's midterms.
Plus, government shutdown day 36. The president calling on Republicans to act.
The biggest thing is the filibuster. We have to get the country going. We will pass legislation at levels you've never seen before.
The push for the so-called nuclear option as the shutdown becomes the longest in history.
And restoring trust.
We've had times when we were more centered around the Bible than we are today, when there were more Bible users than there are today, maybe more scripture-engaged people than there are today.
A deep dive into Americans' view of the Bible and why researchers are hopeful. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Democrats riding high after racking up major election wins. Good evening, I'm Jenna Browder.
And from our Washington News Bureau, I'm John Jessup. Well, Democrats are trumpeting their successes in the first major election since President Trump returned to office. Their candidates scoring big wins in New York City, New Jersey, and Virginia.
Yeah, among the historic victories, New York's first Muslim mayor and Virginia's first female governor. CBN's Brody Carter breaks down the results.
Going into election night, almost every poll forecast Democratic wins. Those predictions held true after counting all the ballots.
Or as we say on Steinway, ana minkum wa ilaykum.
New York City elected a self-described socialist and the city's first Muslim mayor, defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo running as an independent and Republican Curtis Sliwa. A supporter of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel, he argues his criticisms are directed at Israel's government. His progressive platform includes rent freezes, free bus fare, city-run grocery stores, and universal child care.
I want you to know that my goal and my intent is to serve all Virginians.
In Virginia, Democrats won all 3 statewide offices, Abigail Spanberger becoming the state's first female governor after defeating Republican Winsome Earl Sears. The sweep, however, was not without controversy. Democrats elected Attorney General nominee Jay Jones, despite a controversy over text messages from 2022 in which he wrote about giving a GOP rival, quote, 2 bullets to the head.
That language has no place in our discourse, and I am so remorseful for what happened.
The Democratic victory in New Jersey completed the trifecta. U.S. Representative Mikey Sherrill defeated Republican Jack Ciattarelli to keep the governor's mansion blue. On CBN News election night coverage, Nathan Gonzalez of Inside Elections said the Democrat victories serve as a potential canary in the coal mine for Republicans going into the midterms.
But these are states where President Trump improved his margins. And so the question that I've had coming into tonight is, how well do Republicans do when President Trump is not on the ballot? And so far, the answer is not particularly well.
The midterms will be affected by California voters approving Proposition 50, allowing the legislature to redraw congressional maps ahead of the 2030 census. The move is a response to GOP gerrymandering in Texas and could shift up to 5 House seats to Democrats.
Exit polls from ABC News show nearly 7 in 10 voters said the country is on the wrong track. Inflation and the high cost of living topping their list of concerns. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Thank you. That was CBN's Brody Carter. Joining us now, CBN Chief Political Analyst in studio, David Brody, not related to Brody Carter.
David, it's always good to see you. So, as we continue to process through all of these results, what is your big takeaway from last night?
Well, there's quite a few, but I'll just kind of boil it down to this. Democrats got a message last night that if they play their cards right, they could be back in the game in 2026 in the midterm elections if they run center-left candidates. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. Now, once again, there are a lot of folks that will say Abigail Spanberger in Virginia and Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey aren't center-left. They're not moderates. They vote a lot of times with the party. But they didn't emphasize the social issues as much as the affordability issues, the economy. And they do have, from a PR standpoint, a look, a vibe, if you will, and a record to a degree of being center-left. And so if you are center-left as a Democrat, you've got a real shot going forward in the 2026 midterm election. Now, as for Mamdani, that's kind of a whole separate island, literally in Manhattan and New York. That is a whole different situation. We're going to see whether or not that is going to be a test case as to whether or not a Democrat socialist can do well in New York, but I got to tell you, Republicans are kind of chomping at the bit to go after him in the next year or two.
And David, so President Trump already had a previously scheduled meeting with Republicans at the White House this morning, and he acknowledged that the shutdown was a negative factor for Republicans, and even as Nathan Gonzalez pointed out, his name wasn't on the ballot last night. Can you talk about how the shutdown and his name not being on the ballot affected last night's outcome?
Yeah, you could tell he was frustrated. Normally, let the cameras roll and everybody stay for 2 or 3 hours. He wanted the cameras out today. He wanted to have kind of a heart-to-heart talk, some will call it something else, with the Republicans about what happened last night. Look, it was a horrible night, and I think what we're seeing here specifically, and some of this relates to Trump, but the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of anger in the Democrat base out there. They want to see results, and that is not a good situation for Republicans going into the midterms. When you have an angry base that wants to see results, that means they're motivated to get out and vote. And that's why Republicans are going to have to do something different come midterm elections.
Yeah, and in Northern Virginia, we have a lot of federal workers here, so I wonder that might have affected the vote in Virginia as well. David, let's talk about Mamdani. He largely made his campaign about affordability and people really not being able to afford a decent lifestyle, and it resonated with voters, especially young voters. Do you think, David, this is an issue we'll see both sides start to talk about more?
Well, I think the Democrats are already talking about it. I mean, Mikey Sherrill did that in New Jersey. We saw Mamdani do it in New York. And to a degree, obviously, Abigail Spanberger did it in Virginia. But absolutely, affordability is going to be the #1 issue for Democrats if they play their cards right. Now, the far left in the party wants them to talk more about some of these social issues. But look, that's not going to be the winning issue for them. Look, I mean, ultimately, what does it mean? It means that, there's going to be a problem for Mamdani in New York if he can't get things done the way he wants. Remember, he wants to he wants to tax up to $9 billion in new revenue. That's what he wants. He wants to get $9 billion, in new revenue to fund all of these type of programs. I mean, it's free stuff for everybody. It's kind of like the Oprah Winfrey. You get a car, you get a car, everybody gets something. It's like lollipops and gumdrops over there. So we're going to see if that works. But I'll tell you what's interesting to me, if I could just switch back real quick to Virginia, Abigail Spanberger won 59% of independents. And that is crucial if you think about it, because Terry McAuliffe, 4 years before that, running for Virginia governor as a Democrat, only won 45%. So that's the ticket. In other words, Abigail Spanberger won 14% more independents than Terry McAuliffe. That's what they need to do. The Mamdani thing is a whole separate situation.
David, speaking of governorships, Mikey Sherrill pulled off a win. Polls showed that the race would be tighter. What happened in that campaign?
Well, Jack Ciattarelli just couldn't perform. I mean, it was county after county, whether it be in Middlesex County, Monmouth County, Ocean County. He was just totally underperforming. I think part of that could be the fact that Mikey Sherrill was very on message on affordability. That's part of it. I also think, look, Jack Ciattarelli, I can't even say it, Ciattarelli this is the third time he was running for governor. And I think there was a view by voters there in New Jersey that, look, we've seen this guy before. We kind of know the deal. He's not a new thing, out there. And I just don't think it didn't translate with enthusiasm. And I think that's a part of it.
Speaking of enthusiasm, David, Californians on the other side of the coast overwhelmingly approved a ballot measure that could change the makeup of Congress next year, I think by almost 2/3. Do you see that spurring more states to follow suit?
Well, more states are already following suit. So already, if you kind of look at the scorecard right now, with Texas and Missouri and Ohio and another state as well changing their redistricting, there's basically 9 new Republican-leaning seats that they've redistricted for. California now is 5, plus they have one in Utah, that's 6. So it's 9-6 right now in terms of the favor being for Republicans. But, John, to your question, there are 7 other states that right now are thinking or going to redistrict. And 4 of them are blue states, and they're big ones, like Illinois and New York. We'll see if New York actually comes through. 3 of them are red. So when you put it all together, we're not quite sure how the math is going to work out here, but we know that redistricting is going to be a huge issue come these midterm elections.
Yeah, and it looks like affordability too, David. Do you think that This issue of affordability in the economy might force the Trump administration to look at how it's handling the economy, whether it's, the tariffs or the shutdown. Is that going to affect things?
Well, I don't think it's going to affect their policy. I think they might feel a way to, from a PR perspective, to talk about it differently. But even in these comments this morning, President Trump was talking about the shutdown. And he said, look, we've got to end it. We've got to end it quickly. And I think that is based on the heels of the off-year elections. I think that's part of the calculus that, look, this didn't go well for us last night, and we just need to come to a solution here.
David, final thought as we close out our time together about this election and as they look to next year's midterm elections.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, ultimately, the U.S. House is going to be the kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of like the marquee race overall. I mean, 5 seats, right? That's the Republican majority, 5 seats right now. So that's what this is all about. The Senate's going to be a harder slide for Democrats. But I think what Republicans need to understand is that they've got some Democrats and independents that are angry out there, and they're motivated. And because of that, Republicans better be on the ball, or they're going to be in a lot of trouble come midterm elections.
Okay, Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, David. Coming up, a legal showdown at the Supreme Court. Justices weigh President Trump's executive authority eyeing tariffs. This and more next on Faith Nation. Welcome back to Faith Nation. Those stinging losses for Republicans in last night's election are sparking concerns this evening from the White House to Capitol Hill, even as the GOP works to deal with an ongoing shutdown and a Supreme Court battle over the president's economic policies.
CBN senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright and Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London join us now with more reaction to last night's races. Kelly, to you first. The president, he is pointing to several reasons for the GOP losses, including the government shutdown. What is he saying about that tonight, Kelly, and the nuclear option that's getting so much attention right now?
Yeah, Jenna, good evening to you. So the president pointed out this morning before Republican senators here at the White House that national polls stated that the government shutdown had an impact on the outcome of those elections. And those polls indicated that he wasn't on the ballot, which was a big factor. He talked about the elections before those senators this morning and had plenty to say, not only about the elections, but other aspects looking forward in terms of what the Republicans will do. Here's a sample of what he said this morning.
Last night, it was, not expected to be a victory. It was very Democrat areas, but I don't think it was good for Republicans. I don't think it was good. I'm not sure it was good for anybody. But we had an interesting evening, and we learned a lot.
So the president talked about the fact that they learned a lot. And what did they learn? Well, he talked more about that government shutdown, saying that Democrats are at fault, continue to place the blame on them, and have hurt the country with countless, this is a quote, countless public servants who are now not being paid, and the air traffic control system is actually under an increasing strain. And he says we must get the government reopened immediately. And then he wanted to call the Democrats, quoting here, kamikaze pilots who would take the country down if they could. And he also added the government has to reopen immediately, as I stated. And with that, he moved for challenging the Republicans to stop the filibuster.
London, to you, I think it's interesting. You, of course, already know this. Had you been watching congressional press conferences, you noticed that Republicans were already painting the Democratic Party or hitching it to Zoran Mamdani. I'm curious, after last night's elections win, what have you been seeing as the biggest talker on Capitol Hill?
Well, John, I can tell you among the key election races last night, the focus on Capitol Hill is NYC Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani and what his win means for New Yorkers and future elections. Earlier on the Hill, I asked Republican Senator John Cornyn about his thoughts on last night's elections. Overall, Cornyn told me, quote, the problem Democrats have is that Mamdani will now be the face for the Democratic Party leading into the midterms. And he says he thinks that's a real problem. Mamdani, a 34-year-old self-proclaimed Democratic socialist, called his win a mandate for change. But not everyone in his party is in agreement with Mamdani's stances, specifically around Israel. During an earlier interview back in August, I asked New York Congressman Richie Torres, an outspoken Zionist, how he might work with Mamdani in the state on issues surrounding Israel and anti-Semitism, despite their different stances. Listen.
thankfully, the mayor of New York has no authority to set foreign policy from the ivory tower of City Hall. So I will cooperate with Mayor Mamdani on the issues on which we agree, and then on the issues on which we disagree. We'll have a vigorous debate in the marketplace of ideas. We should strive for constructive debate and dissent without demonization.
John, Jenna.
Yeah. London exit polls overwhelmingly point to the economy and affordability as a driving force for voters. Are lawmakers feeling the pressure to act here, especially when it comes to the shutdown?
And that's a good question. Fresh from the party's victories in off-year elections last night, leading Democrat senators are now insisting on a meeting with President Trump to discuss the shutdown. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries wrote a letter to President Trump today, reading in part, quote, it says, "We write to demand a bipartisan meeting of legislative leaders to end the GOP shutdown of the federal government and decisively address the Republican health care crisis." According to sources close to the party, roughly a dozen Senate Democrats actually now say they're ready to end the shutdown. That includes Senator John Fetterman. But the major election wins last night, especially the gubernatorial races in New Jersey and Virginia, seem to be given fresh fuel to calls for the Democratic Party to dig in and fight until they get a deal with Republicans on the affordable health care tax credits. John, Jenna.
Kelly, sticking along the themes of the economy, the Supreme Court weighed the issue of tariffs this morning, examining whether the president has the right to use the Emergency Powers Act to set tariff rates. Has the White House responded to the oral arguments in which the justices seem to express skepticism? And then secondly, how would a loss rattle the president's economic agenda?
So this is a case the president is watching very closely, John. It poses a major challenge to some of President Trump's tariffs. The Supreme Court is focusing on the question, can a president use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, EPA, to actually implement tariffs? And like the fentanyl-related ones on Canada, China, and Mexico, and the sweeping Liberation Day duties, without Congress having any role in the matter. That's the question. Several justices, including Chief Justice Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, and Neil Gorsuch, sounded skeptical during today's oral arguments, and that broad emergency power, can it be used? And lower courts already, of course, have actually stated that this is illegal, that Congress should have a role in this. It does not include the aluminum tariffs that the president has and steel tariffs that he has. This is something that the Supreme Court realizes it has to get done. They've expedited it. Expect a ruling within a couple of months.
All right. Senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright at the White House and Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Up next, America's crisis of trust. Faith in institutions is fading, but millions are rediscovering the Bible. A new report reveals why skepticism and spiritual curiosity are both on the rise. Welcome back. A new report shows many Americans are losing trust in the government, institutions, and even religion.
Despite that shift, the Bible continues to be a spiritual anchor for many. Once again, here's Brody Carter with more.
For more than a decade, the American Bible Society has asked Americans each year about their relationship with Scripture. It tracks who's reading it, what they believe, and why it matters. This year's report shows a country divided between growing skepticism and a new openness to the Bible.
That split indicates a crisis of trust, showing just 36% of Americans believing the Bible is totally accurate, while 39% say it is not. Nearly 1 in 5 people see the Bible as a tool written to control or manipulate people.
The majority of Americans don't ever reach for the Bible at all. They're not what we call Bible users. And what we've noticed here is that trust is really built on relationship. And so when people have a relationship with their family, they trust their family. If they have a broken relationship with their family, trust gets broken with it.
And researcher and Chief Innovation Officer Dr. John Plake concludes that connection between relationship and trust extends beyond the Bible. Taking a closer look, the report shows trust in organized religion stands at just 29%. Meanwhile, the family stands tall as America's most trusted institution at 55%, a glaring contrast to media and government ranking at just 5% and 6%.
You know, I think the state of the Bible in America is hopeful. We've had times when we were more centered around the Bible than we are today, when there were more Bible users than there are today, maybe more scripture engaged people than there are today. But there is a curiosity and an interest in the Bible that I've not seen in 36 years of full-time ministry.
The data shows deep generational divides. Older evangelical and Black Protestant churchgoers remain the most biblically engaged compared to younger generations. In the last year, though, they're driving a surge with Bible use rising among Gen Z by 36% and millennials by 29%. Dr. Plake also points to evidence how reading your Bible can have a positive impact on your mental health, purpose, and relationships.
Looking across that continuum, we found that the more Bible-engaged people are, the lower their levels of anxiety, the lower their levels of traumatic stress, the higher their levels of hope, and the higher their levels of human flourishing.
So while much has been said about religious nuns, which make up a quarter of the U.S. population, a wave of 10 million new Bible users suggests spiritual curiosity remains strong in an uncertain time of skepticism. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Thank you, Brody. Coming up, a tribute to veterans next on Faith Nation.
All right, finally tonight, a special race this weekend in Florida is supporting veterans.
It's an event put on by Wounded Warriors Project called the Carry Forward 5K. What sets this 3-mile race apart is that the runners and walkers complete the course while carrying a flag, weight, or even a person. The theme of this weekend's race in Jacksonville is I Got This, and it's the last of this year's City Series. Retired Marine Sergeant Bill Hansen will be participating and, get this, carrying his 4-year-old son. He credits exercise in the Wounded Warriors Project for helping him turn his life around after being injured during his last tour in Iraq.
To this day, I get other wounded veterans who are like, man, if you can do this sort of thing, I can get on a bike. And I'm trying to do it not just for me, because it helps with my rehabilitation, but also to be an example.
The proceeds of the race go toward funding free services for veterans. And, you know, watching these folks and hearing their stories is a reminder, like, there's really no excuse.
Yeah, this is so cool. No, and he's going to carry a 4-year-old. That's probably 40 pounds.
I can't even carry my own weight.
Same. That's going to do it for Faith Nation.
Have a great night.